Hello, I'm Sheryl McCarthy. Welcome to One to One. By most accounts, the Trump administration is waging an all-out war against immigrants, transgender people, journalists, supporters of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and anyone else who publicly criticizes its actions. Because of this, many Americans fear that their basic civil rights are in jeopardy. One of the loudest public outcries against this comes from the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, whose mission for more than a century has been to protect the individual rights and liberties that are guaranteed by the Constitution. What exactly is the organization doing to combat these threats, and what progress does it see being made? Here to tell us is Donna Lieberman, the longtime executive director of the New York Civil Liberties Union, the New York arm of the ACLU. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's good to see you, Sheryl.
Donna, I think a lot of people believe that the ACLU's primarily focuses on the First Amendment issues, free speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion. I may have missed one or two, but really your purview is those things certainly, but really your purview is much broader.
Yeah, the one you missed was freedom of association. We won't get to religion, and you know, I mention it only because all the First Amendment guarantees work together to create a free society. The freedom to speak, to do it to associate with people without retribution from the government. But you're right, Sheryl. Our mission is so much broader than the First Amendment, and our mission is about equal rights. Our mission is about justice. Our mission is about due process. Our mission covers all the fundamental rights that people think of as at the core of our democracy, and every single one of those rights is under the most dire and sustained threat in certainly my lifetime.
How did we get here? I mean, I know it's a huge question. Why do you think that's happening now?
Well, you know, I think that it's really easy to take our rights for granted. And I think it's also hard to get excited about a neutral principle like freedom of speech. We all believe in free speech in the abstract, but mainly we believe in it for ourselves. Who's going to go to bat for the creeps, right? To, however you define creep, right, to say their piece. I think what we're learning is that we all better go to bat for people we disagree with, because if you don't have the right to speak your mind, then neither do I. If you don't have equal rights, then neither do I. If you don't have a right to a fair process in immigration proceedings, then neither do I. Right now, everybody's rights are under attack. And what has been going on in Minneapolis is, I think, you know, Exhibit A, where the government, you know, swarmed in, going after immigrants, claiming to go after criminals, but we know they were going after people who were here lawfully, going through the processes that were laid out, and who were all of a sudden vulnerable to this gang of thugs with masks who brutalized not just the so-called targets of immigration enforcement, who brutalized anybody who dared to speak up about it. And that includes, I left out freedom of the press. The government is going after anybody who voices an objection to the policies of this administration. Alex Preddy got killed in cold blood in front of everybody, for the world to see, for taking pictures. So they're all interconnected.
Yeah.
And you know, the ACLU has historically been known as a legal organization.
Right.
We go to court. We'll see you in court. And we are very much a legal organization. We file big, bad lawsuits. You know, if we're suing you, you better watch out. And people know that.
Right.
But we do a lot more than that now. We work on policy, we do organizing, we do an enormous amount of public education.
How about lobbying? Do you do a lot of lobbying of public officials? Or?
Oh yes, absolutely. You know, we have a lobbying arm, and we have a fully fledged nonprofit C3 arm that doesn't do lobbying and that does our litigation. But lobbying is so important, and what we have learned over the years is that litigation alone doesn't do it, and lobbying alone doesn't do it, and public education alone doesn't do it. But all together, you know, that's our secret sauce, as it were, and we put a lot of energy into educating public officials, into helping them understand the consequences of what they're doing or not doing, helping them understand the need to act. So it's all of a piece, and we're in there.
I would imagine that you have gotten a lot busier since the Trump administration came in. Has your workload increased?
Increased, to put it mildly, exponentially. Yeah, you know, we have had to develop a whole team of lawyers and policy experts and organizers, you know, to deal with immigration issues, for example. You know, one of the things that we've done for years is educate people about their rights. You know, remember stop and frisk? And we were always out there, you know, we had little cards, you know, we had a website where you could report abuse. And it was important for people to understand what their rights were. And we also knew that we had to walk the line with folks, you know, letting them, you have the right, but whether the police respect you exercising your right is another question, and you need to understand your right and figure out how to act smartly and take only risks that you want to take. And with immigration now, it has been so critical, and it's so wonderful that so many organizations are doing the work of helping people understand what their rights are. If they're an immigrant, if they might be perceived to be an immigrant, if they're attacked by ICE and the rest of the gang of Trumpian thugs, and if you're protesting. And I think what's kind of wonderful about the sustained protest activity that we've seen all over the country. I point to Minneapolis because it's so stark and fresh, is that we see the power of people knowing their rights. We see that when you know your rights, you get appalled when you or somebody else when
their rights are being trampled on. Right.
Yes, absolutely. Right. And I think that's part of what people kind of can't believe is happening to them, and it sustains, it has catalyzed this incredible movement of people looking out for each other and going into the streets and being public, because we have to be there in public, because this wannabe king is counting on us being scared, being intimidated, and shutting up.
Are you getting more applications from recent law school graduates or lawyers who work in other places who want to work for the ACLU or want to be doing this kind of work?
I can't tell you how many people email me and email us and reach out, how can I help, how can I help? And you know, what happens when a movement takes off is that sometimes what may start with like, here's what you can do, here's what you can do, turns into everybody take this information and run with it. Make this your own and organize your friends, organize your book clubs. You have a representative in both houses of the state legislature. You have representatives in Congress. You have a president, and you need to be in touch. And you need to be out there publicly letting them know what you think. And you can't just sit back and let them say, oh yeah, I'm with you. You got to make sure that you hold their feet to the fire and you go into details, and that's very powerful.
Yeah, people taking the initiative.
Absolutely. And there are people to take the initiative with all over the country.
Yeah.
The ACLU has a People Power website where you can sign up to do actions. We work with Hands Off New York City all the time. And there's a huge demonstration, No Kings demonstration, coming up March 28th. And there will be days of action before that. You can go to the Hands Off NYC website and sign up, find out what's going on in your neighborhood. Where do you need to go to get the message out? It's really powerful.
I think that in my neighborhood there is outside a senior center where a group of older people get, if they can't get to the march, I think it's on 79th Street, but I'm not sure, and they gather there in lieu of going to the march to express their outrage is what's going on. So let's look at some of the specific issues that you and many others are concerned about. I know New York City is often referred to as a sanctuary city. Is it? And if so, what does that mean?
There's no legal definition of a sanctuary city, but a sanctuary city is, to my mind, is a city that doesn't allow a single government resource to be spent unless it's absolutely required by law to further the deportation machine. It's a city that goes above and beyond to protect the safety and security of all of us, including our immigrant friends and neighbors and family. And so that means that the police can't give information to ICE unless they are legally required by a court order. And that means that Rikers can't say, hey, John Jones is being released today, and he's
come and get him, right? Exactly, right.
Come and get him,
right?
And that's such an important protection because if local government is in cahoots with ICE, that means that anybody who is remotely vulnerable and every person who has an immigration status and might be perceived to have an immigration status, right, either is or feels vulnerable under this administration. And that means people won't be able to protect their families, take their kids to school, go shopping, go to court, report a crime, be a witness in a case where we absolutely need them. So
what happens now if an immigrant who maybe has a case before the immigration judges gets detained by ICE? What happens to them?
Well, there's a whole cadre of people that goes to 26 Federal Plaza to accompany people so that whether or not they can prevent somebody from getting detained, and sometimes they can record it and make sure that people are notified and that they have access to the means to file a habeas petition. A habeas petition is what you file. It's the old, great, hundreds of years old writ inherited from the British.
Right.
The produce the body. It's the writ of last resort to challenge unlawful detention. And there's a whole bevy of lawyers that are set up to file those, to help people file them. And some people go to court with blank forms to fill out so that they can file them themselves.
There have been a lot of people detained here under the Trump, thousands, I gather. Are there a lot of, I know there was a story the other day about this opposition to a detention center they're trying to build in
Chester, New York.
Right. And also one in New Hampshire, there's a big outcry.
And Kansas.
And Kansas. Well, I assume the detention population, immigrant detention population, has increased. Are there a lot of immigrant detention centers around the state, in the city?
In New York, there aren't.
There are not.
There are not. There's Batavia, and 26 Federal Plaza is not designated as a detention center, but that's where people
Right.
are detained
Right.
And then shipped out. But what we're seeing all across the country is that the Trump administration's effort to convert unused warehouses into detention facilities, prisons, concentration camps, all over the country is meeting resistance. This is the good form of NIMBY. Nobody wants a detention center. Nobody wants a concentration camp in their backyard.
Now,
And places like Texas and New Hampshire, communities, whether they voted for Trump or not, are coming out to stop it. And these efforts are being rolled back, which is a really good thing.
Because a lot of these detention centers, I gather, it's become an industry. I mean, a lot of them are privately run, and they're run for profit, which means that the people inside don't get much food, medical care, because there's a profit motive involved.
There's a combination of cruelty, sadism, and profit motive. And in Dilley, the conditions are horrific. The ACLU, my organization, filed a lawsuit about the conditions at 26 Federal Plaza. There are regs in place, indicating prescribing what kind of facilities you have to have if you're going to hold somebody in detention, and they violated all of them. I mean, they're crowding hundreds of people in cells that were supposed to be limited for a dozen people or so, not providing access to food, medication, lawyers, and we won a preliminary injunction in that case. Of course, the implementation, we have to keep going back to court and try to get them held in contempt or get them ordered to comply, and we're doing that. But I left out a couple of detention facilities, and I want to go back to that because a couple of communities, some communities around New York State, have signed agreements with ICE to use their county jails as ICE detention facilities. Nassau has a horrific detention facility. There's one other that I can't think of right now. But what we're proposing on a statewide level is to make New York a state that is safe for immigrants. And that means no state or local facilities could be used as ICE detention facilities.
That would require a state law action by the legislature.
And none of these like 287G agreements. That's a term of a reference to the section of the law, but whereby local police agree to work for ICE. Nassau County has one. There are 13 others around the state. That's devastating, because if you can't trust the local cops to take care of your kid when they get lost, or to help you when you've been the victim of a crime, or to even ask directions, right?
Is there legislation proposed now?
Yes.
In the state there?
Yes.
Okay.
It's called New York for All. And New York would prohibit 287G agreements. It would prohibit informal arrangements where, local cops call up ICE and say, just thought you might want to know about the guy we're releasing today. None of that can happen. It would prohibit them allowing ICE to rally in the state police parking lot without a warrant. So it's really important that New York, which is so important in the nation as a leader protecting the rights of immigrants and all New Yorkers, pass New York for All. The governor, to her credit, has proposed a bill that would go part of the way, but we can't afford to just go part of the way.
How happy are you, satisfied overall with the governors, the state legislature, the city government's response to what's happening to immigrants?
You know, last year we ran an ad in the Albany Times-Union calling upon our political leaders to get a spine and do right by immigrants. And we were told across the board, the time's not right. The people aren't with us. We're still fighting for New York for All. We're still fighting to prohibit any new detention facilities. We're still fighting for adequate funding for counsel for people in immigration proceedings. And the governor has taken a step towards doing right by proposing a bill to prohibit these 287G agreements, but her bill needs to go further. It needs to prohibit these informal arrangements, calling up ICE or letting them in, come have a tour.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, so there's a little bit of progress. It's not insignificant, the progress, but this is not a moment in time where we can afford to sit back and let ICE and its thugs have their way with anyway. You know, the data sharing stuff is so important, and that's not in the governor's bill yet. You know.
What do you mean?
So the government has so much data on all of us. If you get benefits, if you get a driver's license, if your kid goes to school, if you go to the hospital, a city hospital, and then there's all the private data. If the state-held data is shared with the federal government, with ICE, then all these people who are trying to follow the rules, who are trying to live life and take care of their families and educate their kids are so totally screwed.
Right.
Because
right.
ICE is funded to the hilt to go after people in the streets, online, everywhere they can find them, and you know that they are going after people who are following the rules and trying to get their status adjusted, recognized, and to live here and be productive members of society.
While we were talking about detention of immigrants, what is happening with Rikers Island? They have been supposedly closing it for years. Supposedly they aren't doing solitary confinement anymore. What is happening with Rikers Island? How has the ACLU been involved?
Yeah, so you know, we've been very active in trying to end solitary confinement at Rikers and statewide. We were instrumental in litigating to stop prolonged solitary as torture.
Isn't it supposed to be outlawed?
Oh yeah, and honored in the breach, you know, we're still fighting for that. You know, I have to say that, you know, we are coming off, you know, 4 years of an administration that was just so disappointing.
The Adams administration?
Yes, you know, in every area of justice. But between the lawsuit and the court monitor and the court-appointed monitor and the Mamdani administration, both in terms of policing policy and in terms of Rikers policies, detention policies, I'm hoping that the pressure to reduce the jail population enough so that it can be closed. They're supposed to be building community-based facilities.
Right, in each
There's
borough.
and not one of them will be ready on time.
Are they building any? Are they actually building any? Is there any construction going on?
Yes, and my understanding is I think the soonest any of those facilities will be ready is 2031. So Rikers isn't going to be closed by the deadline. The question is whether one question is whether the population will be reduced enough so that it can be, and that's about, in significant measure, bail policies, mental health access, and law enforcement. Are we as a city going to finally abandon these so-called quality of life enforcement, the heavy enforcement of Black and brown communities with regard to low-level offenses? Are we going to finally abandon a policing response to a public health crisis called, to mental health issues?
Right.
And the mayor, I believe, wants to do that, and we're certainly advocating for that. And it's so important.
Yeah.
He's saying the right things, and the city council and the public health infrastructure and the police department need to cooperate to ensure that Rikers Island is not the largest mental health care provider in the country, but is rather a very lightly populated entity that can be eliminated as soon as possible.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. But the ACLU is involved in, I was looking at your agenda for 26, you're involved in so many other things on the international front, trying to get information about the administration's boat strikes in international waters, the rights of public school students. I wish we had time to talk about, you call for comprehensive sex education for students in the public schools. But anyway, there are so many issues that that need to be addressed, and the ACLU is addressing many, if not all of them. I'd like to thank Donna Lieberman, Executive Director of the New York Civil Liberties Union, for joining me today. To learn about our upcoming shows, you can follow us on Instagram at 121 CUNY TV, and you can watch the show on the go by downloading the CUNY TV app. For 121 and CUNY TV, I'm Sheryl McCarthy.